Chapter 4 of the Cambridge Handbook to Judaism. The Bar-Kochba Revolt, 132 to 135 AD. Article written by Hanan Eshel. 1. Introduction. The fourth decade of the 2nd century CE witnessed the outbreak and apex of the final Jewish uprising against Roman rule in Palestine. Named the Bar-Kochba Revolt for its leader, its details remain shrouded in mystery. With no historical treatise to provide a systematic account of the revolt and no lost work, Roman or Jewish, describing it, any scholarly attempt to reconstruct its course inevitably confronts the stumbling block of reliance on sources representing varying objectives, reliability, and dates, leaving many seminal issues unresolved. Continuing to be debated are the revolt's direct causes, the geographical extent of Bar-Kochba's regime, and whether it included Jerusalem, and the magnitude of the Roman reaction. Furthermore, the available literary, epigraphic, numismatic, and archaeological evidence reveals nothing of the revolt's military confrontations. So terse is the one extant historical account of the revolt, found in the abridged version of the 3rd century historian Cassius Dio's Roman history, that it fails even to name the rebel leader. Archaeological findings from 1952 to the present, mainly papyrological, fill the gaps to a certain extent. However, they by no means create a coherent account of events in Palestine during the 3-year revolt. Emerging is a partial picture of Bar-Kochba's leadership style and administration, his state's borders, Jewish observance under wartime conditions, and the strong Roman reaction. 2. Causes. Briefly described, factors contributory to the revolt include administrative changes in Judea following the first revolt of 66-70, the unrest caused by the sizable Roman military presence in Judea, a possible economic decline, a shift from landowning to sharecropping, the nationalistic agitation provoked by Jewish uprisings in Egypt, Cyrenaica, and Libya during the Trajanic Revolt, and Trajan's War, the War of Quietus, against the Jews of Mesopotamia. For proximate causes, the sparse historical evidence focuses inconclusively on the foundation of the pagan city of Aelia Capitolina on the ruins of Jerusalem, or on Hadrian's ban on circumcision. Although scholars are divided about these factors' weight and historicity, the prevailing consensus ascribes a role to both. One must also note the part played by the construction of a temple to Jupiter on the Temple Mount. Reminiscent of the introduction of a statue of Zeus to the temple in 167 BCE that had sparked the Hasmonean Revolt, the Jews evidently believed they could once again successfully rid the Temple Mount of this unwanted idolatrous presence. Clouding the determination of the causes of the revolt is the Church Father Eusebius' dating of the establishment of Aelia Capitolina to 136, thus making it an outcome rather than a cause of the conflict. In support of Eusebius' testimony, E.M. Smallwood cites the Mishnaic report of the symbolic plowing of Jerusalem's circumference after the fall of Bethar. Proof for an earlier founding of Aelia Capitolina, however, comes from coins minted there prior to this date, and found in hoards concealed in the Judean desert in 135. These hoards, containing both Bar-Kochba and Aelia Capitolina coins, lend corroboration to Dio's account of Aelia Capitolina's founding in 130 during Hadrian's visit to that city. Similarly, scholars question the historical basis for the purported inflammatory role played by Hadrian's ban on circumcision. Given Historia Augusta's doubtful historicity, Geiger argues that the ban was a punitive post-revolt measure. Others, Mildenberg for example, accept the testimony of the Historia Augusta regarding the ban's role in sparking the revolt, postulating that this measure was a Hadrianic extension of Domitian's well-known prohibition against castration to circumcision. In the wake of Hadrian's visit to Palestine in 130, any Jewish misconceptions that they were exempt from this decree, as from emperor worship, were dispelled, ultimately sparking rebellion. Grounded mainly in the testimony of the 3rd century jurist Modestinus, these hypotheses neither date the ban on circumcision conclusively nor prove that it provoked the revolt. D. R. Schwartz's re-examination of the abrogation of the temple and of circumcision in divinely controlled historical events in the Epistle of Barnabas, presumably written during Hadrian's reign, points to a pre-revolt promulgation of the ban on circumcision. 3. Preparations. Although its direct causes remain undetermined, large-scale Jewish preparations for revolt are described by Dio and evidenced by archaeological discoveries. Dio reported the following: the Jews purposely made of poor quality such weapons as they were called upon to furnish, in order that the Romans might reject them and that they themselves might thus have the use of them. But when he went further away, they openly revolted. To be sure, they did not dare try conclusions with the Romans in the open field, but they occupied the advantageous positions in the country and strengthened them with mines and walls, in order that they might have places of refuge whenever they should be hard pressed, and might meet together unobserved underground. And they pierced these subterranean passages from above at intervals to let in air and light. No archaeological discoveries support Dios' description of the Jewish manufacture of defective weapons. On the contrary, the weapons excavated at insurgent-controlled sites are identical to Roman ones. His remarks concerning the tunnels, hideaways, subterranean passageways, and shafts, however, have received positive confirmation with the discovery of hundreds of hiding complexes, particularly in the Judean Shephelah. Based on its proximity to Jerusalem, its numerous nearby springs, and its defensibility, Bedhar was chosen to serve as the rebels' headquarters. Excavations at Bedhar have uncovered fortifications presumably built by Bar-Kochba's forces, although serious damage inflicted on archaeological remains there during illegal excavations in the 19th or early part of the 20th century hampers their precise identification. Moreover, the question at which stage of the revolt these defenses were constructed, its outbreak or later in the war, is not easily resolved. 4. Leadership and administration. The discovery of documents in the Judean desert in 1952 resolved the ambiguity regarding the name of the revolt's leader left by its sparse documentation. While some earlier scholars had maintained that Bar-Kochba, Hebrew, son of the star, was his original name, and the appellation Bar-Kochba, Hebrew, son of disappointment, a reflection of post-revolt bitterness, the Judean desert documents have categorically established that this leader's original name and title was Simeon ben Kochba Nasi Yisrael. Bar-Kochba was the sobriquet bestowed by his supporters, based on Rabbi Akiva's messianic interpretation of Numbers 24.17. A star Kochav rises from Jacob. Rabbinic literature testifies to Rabbi Akiva's support of ben Kochba, also recording the dissenting opinion of Yohanan ben Torda. Whether or not the latter's statement disputing Akiva's acclamation of ben Kochba as Messiah reflects a personal stance or a broader opposition circle remains indeterminable. 17 letters discovered in the Judean desert, which were dispatched from Simeon ben Kochba's headquarters, not only disclosed ben Kochba's name, but also shed light on his personality. The ben Kochba of the letters emerges as a demanding leader and as a stickler for detail who constantly rebuked his subordinates for failing to fulfill their assignments scrupulously. Despite the information that these letters provide, they still leave many areas tantalizingly inaccessible. For example, these undated letters cannot be assigned to a specific point in the revolt, neither to its beginning, when ben Kochba was at the pinnacle of his strength, nor to its end, when his position was disastrous. Ben Kochba's undisputed position as the uprising's leader is supported by numismatic finds. Most rebel-manufactured coins bear the name Simeon, while the name of an unidentified individual, Eleazar the priest, is inscribed on an additional group of coins. 3 possible identifications have been proffered for the latter: Eleazar of Modian, Hammodai, Eleazar ben Azariah, or Eleazar ben Harsam, but it is possible that Eleazar the priest is otherwise unknown, that is, not mentioned in rabbinic literature. In any event, the presence of a priestly figure in the insurgent leadership suggests plans to capture Jerusalem and restore the temple cult, but these aspirations were not fulfilled. Judean desert documents also provide a glimpse of Bar-Kochba's administrative system. Bar-Kochba appointed military commanders and civilian administrators, Parnasim, drawn from the local population in the areas under his control. All totaled, 7 commanders are known. 1 Yeshua ben Galgala, whose family lived in the village of Bet Batsi, near Herodium, was appointed commander of Herodium. 3 individuals, Yonatan ben Bayan, Maspala ben Simeon, and Eleazar ben Haida, jointly commanded the En-Gedi region. 15 letters from Yonatan ben Bayan's personal archive reveal ben Kochba taking a close interest in administrative affairs and maintaining frequent contact with his commanders. Additional letters disclose the names of other commanders: Yehuda ben Manasseh, who served in Kiryat Arabiah, and a superior commander named Elisha, whom En-Gedi's commanders had to obey. Another commander, named Simeon ben Mahanim, reported to Bar-Kochba a military defeat in which brethren were devoured. This letter's uncertain provenance makes a determination of the region that Simeon ben Mahanaim controlled difficult. Nonetheless, either the Machaerus region in Transjordan or the Ziph region in the South Hebron Hills appears a likely candidate. In addition, Judean desert documents reveal the existence of Ben Kochba appointed Parnasim administrators to oversee civilian matters, primarily land leasing and weights supervision. Regrettably, the scant information found in these documents discloses little more than these district administrators' names and involvement in land leasing or other matters. For example, one document supplies the name of the Herodium administrator, Hillel ben Geras, who leased land in Ir Nahash belonging to Ben Kochba. The documents also reflect changes in personnel. If, during year 1 of the revolt, Yohanan ben Yeshua and Horon ben Yishmael served as En-Gedi's Parnasim, during year 3 Yonatan ben Mahanaim held this post. At Bet Mashko, probably situated near Herodium, 2 Parnasim, Yeshua ben Eleazar and Eleazar ben Yosef, were appointed, as a letter sent to Herodium commander Yeshua ben Galgala concerning the illegal confiscation of a cow divulges. Their failure to appeal to Herodium's civilian administrator is surprising. Finally, from an inscription on lead weights, one learns of a Parnas named Simeon de Soy, who served in the Shephelah. Notwithstanding these insights into Bar-Kochba's administrative infrastructure, the hierarchy of command between its civilian and military leaders cannot be determined. Neither can one draw a precise map of the regional divisions in Ben Kochba's state, although during the revolt Judea was undoubtedly divided into smaller units than the Second Temple toparchies that were also in effect between 73 to 132. 5. The revolt. Given one's inability to chart the revolt's course, its military confrontations and its victories or defeats, this discussion of necessity must focus on other aspects of the event. Likewise, for their exploration of the dating, extent, and economic reality of the Bar-Kochba regime, scholars are forced to rely on Ben Kochba's undated letters, dated economic documents that do not relate directly to the revolt, and numismatic and archaeological discoveries. The revolt most probably began in the summer of 132. The exact month in which year 1 of the Bar-Kochba regime began, however, is a matter of debate. Although some scholars argue for the traditional beginning of the Jewish year in Nisan, that is, the spring of 132, based on the joint consideration of 2 dated documents, one from Transjordan and the other from En-Gedi, I would argue that year 1 should be dated from the inception of Bar-Kochba's regime, sometime during summer 132, or from Tishri, that is, the fall of 132. P. Yadin 27 indicates that as of August 132, Jews in Transjordan had not yet fled to En-Gedi. P. Yadin 42, dated on the 1st of Iyar, year 1 of the redemption of Israel by the hands of Simeon ben Kochba, is the earliest extant document dated according to the revolt. For this latter document to reflect a stable administrative structure and economy with Parnasim functioning in En-Gedi and Iyar, May, year 1, Bar-Kochba's state must have been established months earlier. Taking these documents into consideration, and based on Eusebius' statement that the war began in 1329, it is appropriate to date year 1 of the revolt from the summer or the fall of 132 to summer or fall 133. Year 2 from summer or fall 133 to summer or fall 134. And year 3 from summer or fall 134 to summer or fall 135. At present, no extant documents date from year 4. While it appears that the insurgents enjoyed military successes during the revolt's initial stage, the scope of these victories, like so many facets of the revolt, is unknown. Life in Judea appears to have continued as usual during the revolt's first summer. P. Yadin 42 testifies to a willingness to invest large sums in land rental, implying economic stability in the En-Gedi region. In this May 133 document, 2 of Bar-Kochba's administrators granted a 4-year lease on fields to farmers from En-Gedi for the astronomical sum of 650 dinars per year. Evidently, during the first year of the revolt, Bar-Kochba managed to launch a state and an administrative apparatus that allowed daily life and the local economy, as documented for En-Gedi, and most likely other regions in Judea, to proceed undisturbed. This non-disturbance was not the case, though, for regions outside Judea whose Jews felt the effects of the revolt. Soon after the initial uprising, Jews from the villages of Mahoza and Luhit in the Roman province of Arabia, Transjordan, left their homes. Sometime after August 132, 2 women, Baba the daughter of Simeon, and Salome Komes, fled from Mahoza, near Zor, to En-Gedi. When the revolt failed, they left En-Gedi and hid in a cave in Nahal Hever, taking their documents with them. Jews from Luhit in the Eglatane region also fled to En-Gedi. Like many aspects of the Bar-Kochba regime, its geographical extent remains uncertain, although it seems that Judea proper, but not Jerusalem, remained under insurgent rule. Some likelihood also exists that Ben-Kochba gained hegemony over a small part of Transjordan. 13 economic documents and 23 letters discovered in the Judean desert confirm that Ben-Kochba was in control of the Herodium and En-Gedi regions until 135, when the people who owned these documents fled. The documents refer to the following regions: Herodium, Ir Nahash, apparently to be identified with Kirbet Natash near Herodium, Tico, Kiryat Arabia, and En-Gedi. Of particular significance are two documents from Adar year 3, February 135, relating to Ben-Kochba as ruling the village of Baru. If the identification of Baru with Beru, located north of Machiris, found in Josephus' rabbinic sources, Eusebius Onomasticon, and the Mediba map, is correct, during the third year of the revolt Ben-Kochba's regime even extended over part of the Praye region, Jewish Transjordan. Coins and their geographical distribution make a crucial contribution to the discussion, despite the fact that most of these coins were unearthed during illegal excavations, and therefore their place of origin cannot be established. Rather than mint new coins, the Bar-Kochba regime overstruck Roman ones, and their blatant erasure of the imperial image along with the superimposition of Bar-Kochba's name certainly served propaganda purposes. These overstruck coins were valid tender only in Bar-Kochba-controlled areas. Based on the discovery of insurgent hidden hoards of imperial coins, all of which predate 132, that were concealed against the eventuality of the revolt's failure, or if their owners left the region, one can adduce a virtual state of economic isolation from neighboring regions. Significantly, to date, no Bar-Kochba coins have been discovered either in the well-excavated Galilee or in the much less studied Transjordan area. Although this absence seems to exclude the Galilee from Bar-Kochba's state, but not necessarily a small section of Transjordan, as seen above, this fact obviates neither the possibility that local Jewish guerrilla forces saw military engagement there nor that Bar-Kochba's army operated beyond the borders of Judea, in Samaria, the Jezreel Valley, Transjordan, and perhaps the Galilee. Galileans appear in a letter discovered in Wadi Murabiat, Mor 43, in which Ben-Kochba threatens to clap Yeshua ben Galgala and his men in fetters if injury befalls the Galileans in his region. The identity of these Galileans has provoked scholarly debate. Milik and Teicher assume that Galilean means Christian. Others identify them as Jews who joined Bar-Kochba voluntarily, or were otherwise forced to flee from the Galilee to Judea, taking refuge in the Herodium region. In the absence of Bar-Kochba coins in the Galilee, an absence that suggests that the revolt failed to spread to this region, the latter explanation seems more likely. Dio's observation that soon, however, all Judea had been stirred up, and the Jews everywhere were showing signs of disturbance, were gathering together, and giving evidence of great hostility to the Romans, partly by secret and partly by overt acts, may elucidate the circumstances that forced Jews from other areas, the province of Arabia and perhaps the Galilee, to seek refuge in regions under Bar-Kochba's command. Another frequently debated issue, whether Bar-Kochba captured Jerusalem, also hinges largely on numismatic evidence. The debate revolves around the question of the significance of Bar-Kochba tetradrachms portraying the temple. These coins have led some scholars to assert that Bar-Kochba captured Jerusalem and renewed the sacrificial cult. And they support this claim by referring to the Freedom of Jerusalem coins struck by Bar-Kochba. However, other scholars reject this claim. Instead, they contend that the Freedom of Jerusalem coins were expressly designed to encourage the insurgents, particularly in the third year when the Jewish military situation deteriorated, and do not count as evidence of the conquest of the city. Of the 15,000 coins unearthed in archaeological excavations in Jerusalem, the fact that only 3 coins overstruck by the insurgents have been discovered definitively proves, in my opinion, that Ben-Kochba never captured Jerusalem. It remained under Roman control for the entire length of the war. Apparently, Roman soldiers took these 3 coins, along with a Bar-Kochba coin found in Caesarea and one found in Hungary, in a Roman soldier's grave, as souvenirs. It seems likely that the minting of Roman Aelia Capitolina coins induced the countermanufacture of Bar-Kochba coins inscribed with the words, "For the freedom of Jerusalem." This slogan served propagandistic purposes, to remind the Jewish community that Jerusalem was a Jewish, not a pagan city. A recent re-examination of 4 documents from Wadi Murabiat previously ascribed to the Bar-Kochba revolt, believed to indicate that Bar-Kochba captured Jerusalem, revealed them to be irrelevant. Carbon-14 dating irrefutably established that these 4 documents, 2 written in Jerusalem, More 29-30, and 1 containing a reference to the liberation of Jerusalem in year 3, More 25, and another to the redemption of Israel in year 4, More 22, date to the first revolt. Fresh numismatic discoveries have further altered and extended the picture of the Bar-Kochba regime's geographical boundaries. When first surveyed, only 1 Bar-Kochba coin had been unearthed in Wadi ed-Dalia north of Jericho, and none had been discovered in the region south of Ain Arab, Kiryat Arabia, during authorized excavations. On the basis of this evidence, Mildenberg proposed that Ben-Kochba controlled neither region. Recent discoveries have overturned this assumption. Consideration of both the geographical distribution of coins and the hiding complexes supports the argument that, with the exception of Jerusalem, which remained in Roman hands throughout the war, Ben-Kochba controlled all of Judea from the northern Negev to southern Samaria during the revolt's initial period, 132-3. Just as it is beyond one's ability to reconstruct the insurgents' early successes in gaining control of Judea, it is difficult to trace the time and the manner in which the Romans turned the tide in 134-5. The latest extant document known to have been written during the Bar-Kochba revolt, XFJev/Say 13, a receipt waiving a post-divorce payment, is dated on the 20th of Sivan year 3, June 135 of the freedom of Israel in the name of Simeon ben Kochba, and the latest real estate transactions are dated a month earlier, XHEV/Say 7 and 8a. Undated letters found in the Judean desert illuminate aspects of the collapse of Bar-Kochba's state, but do not pinpoint this process's inception. Letters from the administrators of Bet Mashko to Yeshua ben Galgala, More 42, noting Gentile proximity and citing this nearness as their reason for not coming in person, provide no clues regarding the time when the Romans neared Herodium. A fragmentary Hebrew letter, More 45, referring to people who perished by the sword and containing the expression, until the end, may be a report on the battle waged by Ben-Kochba's men. In a third fragmentary letter, More 46, En-Gedi administrator Yonatan ben Mahanim requests the dispatching of a functionary to bury the dead. Ben-Kochba's letters dispatched to En-Gedi also convey a sense of his dire straits at the war's end. In one letter, Aryadin 49, he reprimands Masbala and Yonatan for living well, eating and drinking off of the property of the house of Israel, and caring nothing about your brethren. In others, Ben-Kochba promises to punish those who disobey him and threatens to burn the houses occupied by refugees from Tico who had evaded joining his cause. Also indicative of the severity of Ben-Kochba's plight are 2 letters, obviously written before the festival of Sukkot, which discuss bringing the 4 species to his camp, p. Yadin 52-57. In one of these letters, written in Aramaic, p. Yadin 57, and dated by Yadin to fall 134, Ben-Kochba writes that he is providing 2 donkeys to transport the 4 species. On this basis, Yadin concluded that Ben-Kochba was experiencing difficulties because, without provision of transport, the 4 species would not reach his encampment. In addition to the 2 letters about the 4 species necessary to observe Sakat p. Yadin 52-57, letters, economic documents, and other discoveries from the Judean desert caves show Ben-Kochba and the insurgents strictly observing Jewish law. 2 letters relate to Sabbath observance. One requests an officer be sent to Ben-Kochba before the Sabbath, p. Yadin 50, and another asks the Herodium commander for accommodations for his men over the Sabbath, More 24. Economic documents discovered in Wadi Murabiat appear to indicate that the insurgents observed the sabbatical year for land, More 44, and artifacts found in the Cave of Letters reveal that in accord with Jewish law, M. A.V. Zar. For point 5, the insurgents defaced the pagan deities on bronze utensils taken as booty from Roman military units. In addition, they are also known to have observed the precepts of Tzitzit and Shatnez. 3 documents from the end of the Bar-Kochba revolt may illuminate the economic reversal suffered in Bar-Kochba's state as the war concluded. Each speaks to the high value of currency versus a drastic decline in real estate. In a deed penned on leather, XHEV/Say49, in Kislev of Year 2, December 134, of the redemption of Israel by Simeon ben Kosiba, the Nasi of Israel, Yehoseph ben Hananiah borrowed 1 tetradrachm from the soldier Yehuda ben Yehuda. The borrower promised to repay the tetradrachm immediately upon request. This transaction, recorded on leather and signed by 3 witnesses, clearly illustrates the enormous value of a tetradrachm at that time. A second document, XHV/Say8A, written during the month of Adar in Year 3 of the liberation of Israel, February 135, relates to the purchase of a house in the village of Beru by Hadad ben Yehuda from Eliezer ben Eliezer for only 2 tetradrachms. Despite the assumption that this house was in a dilapidated condition or very small, this document seems to indicate a drastic situation in Beru in winter 135. XFJev/Say7, written in ER, May of Year 3, reflects a similar situation. Taken together, these documents suggest that, given the economic conditions that prevailed near the end of the revolt, cash was favored over real estate holdings. The war's last significant military engagement apparently occurred at Bethar, Ben Kosiba's capital. The Roman siege complex, similar to the one constructed by the 10th Legion at Masada in 73 or 74, consisted of 5 military camps and a 4 km long dike. Rabbinic literature notes the large number of Jewish fighters killed trying to breach the dike. 60 men went down to the Charkham 58 at Bethar, and not a single one of them came back. Toes. Yev. 14.8. Based on the Mishnaic dating of the Roman conquest of Bethar to the 9th of Avi, M. Tan. For point 6, one can posit that the city was taken in summer 135. 6. The Roman army's war against Bar-Kochba. Subjugating Judea was by no means an easy task. The precise nature of the Roman response, its magnitude, the identification and number of participating legions and auxiliary units, and the roles of Rufus and Severus, continues to be debated. Without knowledge of important battles or their outcomes, one can gain a glimpse of Roman strategy and tactics, and their impact on Judea's inhabitants, from the following abridged version of Dio. Then indeed, Hadrian sent against them his best generals. First of these was Julius Severus, who was dispatched from Britain, where he was governor, against the Jews. Severus did not venture to attack his opponents in the open at any one point, in view of their numbers and their desperation, but by intercepting small groups, thanks to the number of his soldiers and his under-officers, and by depriving them of food and shutting them up, he was able, rather slowly to be sure, but with comparatively little danger, to crush, exhaust, and exterminate them. Very few of them in fact survived. 50 of their most important outposts and 985 of their most famous villages were razed to the ground. 580,000 men were slain in the various raids and battles, and the number of those who perished by famine, disease, and fire was past finding out. Many Romans, moreover, perished in this war. Therefore Hadrian, in writing to the Senate, did not employ the opening phrase commonly affected by the emperors: "If you and your children are in health, it is well. I and the legions are in health." The list of Roman forces that participated in suppressing the Bar-Kochba revolt, compiled on the basis of epigraphic sources, tombstone and commemorative inscriptions, milestones and diplomas, assists in a tentative assessment of their magnitude. The 2nd century Roman army was divided into legions composed of heavy infantry, supposed to number 6,000 soldiers, and auxiliary forces, cavalry and archers, numbering either 480 or 850 soldiers. Participants from some 10 or 11 legions plus soldiers from over 30 auxiliary units, some brought from Britain, participated in the fighting. In the case of the legions mentioned in inscriptions, one cannot always determine whether the entire legion or only some specific units participated. Nevertheless, the available evidence indicates that 6 legions, 2, 3, 6, x 12 XXI, participated in their entirety, and another 4 or 5 were partially represented. The extraordinary measures taken by the Romans to suppress the revolt, the large number of troops they employed and the experienced generals they engaged, and their celebration of the final victory by awarding the highest military honors and erecting a triumphal arch is proof that the Romans perceived the uprising as a genuine threat to their empire. The Roman military force dispatched to quash the rebellion apparently numbered over 50,000 Roman soldiers. The size of Bar-Kochba's force remains entirely conjectural. Although certainly smaller than the Roman forces, Given the magnitude of their antagonists' response, it must have numbered in the tens of thousands. Likewise, one cannot realistically estimate Roman losses during the war, although both Dio and the famous orator Fronto, a contemporary of Marcus Aurelius, note the large number of Roman casualties incurred in clashes with Jews. Fronto compared the number of casualties suffered in Judea with Roman losses in Britain. Difficulty inheres even in the reconstruction of the precise succession in the Roman chain of command. When the revolt commenced, Tinius Rufus was governing Judea, having been appointed to this post in 130 after previously serving as consul in Rome in 127. Following his service in Judea, he disappears from the scene without a trace. However, Dio omits any reference to Rufus, relating only that Hadrian appointed the former governor of Britain, Sextus Julius Severus, as commander of the Roman forces in Palestine during the revolt. Indeed, epigraphic evidence indicates that Severus was appointed governor of Judea and of Syria. Yet, surprisingly, Severus is mentioned neither in rabbinic sources nor by the Church Fathers. Rabbinic sources attribute the ban on circumcision and Rabbi Akiva's execution to Rufus. Thus one can postulate a pre-Severan dating for both events. The Church Fathers, Eusebius, for example, he 4.6, who notes that Rufus killed countless Jews and expropriated their lands, make no mention of Severus. Insofar as no historical source mentions both Rufus and Severus, placing the events connected to these two personages within a historical context is problematic. Based on the testimony of the Church Fathers that Rufus officiated at the end of the war, Smallwood proposes that Rufus remained in Judea to command the 10th Legion, even after Severus was appointed commander-in-chief of the Roman forces in Palestine. Nonetheless, as Rufus held consular rank, one cannot automatically assume that he served under Severus in Judea. My reconstruction of the turnover in the Roman leadership places Rufus in command of the Roman forces in Palestine when the revolt began. And if Eusebius' information is accurate, these forces enjoyed some military success during the war's initial stages. I suggest that Rufus died during the war, either in battle or of natural causes. For his part, upon first learning of the revolt in winter 132 while in Athens, Hadrian evidently assumed command of the Roman forces in Palestine at some time during 133. Before departing from Palestine for Rome in May 134, Hadrian sent to Britain for Julius Severus. As an inscription from Britain documents his successor governing Britain in 135, one can date Severus' arrival in Palestine to late 134 or early 135. The following points substantiate the assumption that the revolt's severity warranted Hadrian's presence. First, a senior centurion of the Praetorian Guard received medals for his war service, from which one can extrapolate that he was in Judea together with the emperor. Secondly, several Roman inscriptions refer to the war as Expeditio Ladaica, a term used solely for battles in which the emperor participated. Thirdly, a treatise by Apollodorus of Damascus on the conduct of war, written in response to an imperial inquiry on the way to combat enemies operating in mountainous regions rather than barricading themselves within a city, is associated by some scholars with Hadrian's suppression of the Bar-Kochba revolt. Finally, Dio states that Hadrian did not use the expression, "I and the legions are in health," when he reported to the Senate. The Roman sense of having won a great victory emerges from Hadrian's second acclamation as imperator some time after 135, following the revolt's suppression. According to Dio, Hadrian's best commanders accompanied Julius Severus to Judea. For their achievements in Judea, Severus and two others, Certus Publicus Marcellus, the governor of Syria, and Haterius Nepos, governor of the province of Arabia, received the highest imperial Roman military honor, Ornamenta Triumphalia. The remains of a 10 triumphal arch dedicated to Hadrian following his second acclamation as imperator, discovered 12 kilometers south of Bet Shean, Scythopolis, near the 6th Fijians' camp at Tel Shalem, further corroborate the importance the Romans ascribed to their victory. Presumably, this arch's construction, built by Senate proclamation, dates to a time after the suppression of the Bar-Kochba revolt. The construction of this arch was unusual in that it dates to a time when the Senate no longer dedicated triumphal arches in the provinces, and because of its monumental 40 cm high lettering. 7. Aftermath. Although Dio's figure of 985 as the number of villages destroyed during the war seems hyperbolic, all Judean villages, without exception, excavated thus far were razed following the Bar-Kochba revolt. This evidence supports the impression of total regional destruction following the war. Historical sources note the vast numbers of captives sold into slavery in Palestine and shipped abroad. After the fall of Bethar and the end of the war in autumn, 135 Jewish refugees, mainly military commanders, administrators, and their families, fled to natural caves outside Judean villages. Jerome reports that the citizens of Judea came to such distress that they, together with their wives, their children, their gold and their silver, in which they trusted, remained in underground tunnels and deepest caves, in Isaiah 2.15. At present, 27 refuge caves from the end of the Bar-Kochba revolt, some located on the steep cliffs along wadis in the Judean desert, have been discovered. Approximately half of these caves were found by Roman forces, who sometimes built siege camps above them, slowly starving the insurgents to death. Their desperation may be preserved in the following legend found in Lamentations Kaba 1.45. Those Jews who were hidden in the caves devoured the flesh of their slain brethren. Every day one of them ventured forth and brought the corpses to them which they ate. One day they said, "Let one of us go, and if he finds anything let him bring it, and we shall have to eat." On going out he found the slain body of his father, which he took and buried, and marked the spot. He returned and reported that he had found nothing. Thereupon a second individual was sent to find food. He uncovered the body hidden by the first and brought it to the camp. Upon discovering that he had eaten from his father's corpse, the son exclaimed, "Woe to me! I have eaten the flesh of my father." The final military operations continued in September and October I-35, and it may have taken until 136 for the Romans to subdue Judea entirely. The Judean Jewish community never recovered from the Bar-Kochba War. In its wake, Jews no longer formed the majority in Palestine, and the Jewish center moved to the Galilee. Jews were also subjected to a series of religious edicts promulgated by Hadrian that were designed to uproot the nationalistic elements within the Judean Jewish community. These proclamations remained in effect until Hadrian's death in 138. An additional, more lasting punitive measure taken by the Romans involved expunging Judea from the provincial name, changing it from Provincia Judea to Provincia Syria Palestina. Although such name changes occurred elsewhere, never before or after was a nation's name expunged as the result of rebellion. Following the appalling failure of the Bar-Kochba revolt, the Jews made no further attempts to achieve national independence. Within decades, the honorific title Nasi, which had been bestowed on Bar-Kochba as a military title, acquired a religious meaning. The next notable individual to be identified in this manner was Rabbi Judah ben Nasi, the editor of the Mishnah. This shift from politics to religion encapsulates the decisive impact of the Bar-Kochba revolt on Jewish history.